Welcome to Will's Personal Development Podcast, where we bring you data and science-backed answers and advice from billionaires. Welcome to Will's Personal Development Show. My name is Will Chow, and I'm coming to you from willyoulaugh.com. Today we're going to be talking about three separate but related topics that I think are universal to many people who are struggling to build their dreams. So what are these topics? The first is work-life balance. The second is making a lot of money to travel the world. And the third is getting into med school. I think even if you're not trying to get into med school, I think some of the success principles that I will mention through each of these components is applicable to many different people. So let's just get started. I want to start with a story about how these three came about. I think this is an incredible story. So I was visiting a city and I went to a bar/restaurant to explore the area because it was kind of cool. It was not just a regular bar or restaurant, but they had artificially created a beach there by pouring sand all over the place. And there's sand there, there's bungalows there, there's cornhole boards on the floor, there's 3 nets worth of sand volleyball, there were bocce courts, there was 3 or 4 bocce courts, there was swings. They had wooden swings that were painted all sorts of different colors, from pink to red to orange and to light blue, that were hanging, and they had little tiny light bulbs hanging as decorations across the top of all of this. So it was a very fun tropical location, and I went to this place, but I was just not feeling like I was up to snuff. What I mean by that is not that I had like low self-esteem out of nowhere, but I really knew that I needed to progress my dating life. This is something I've talked about a lot already. So I wanted to talk to some attractive girls there. Unfortunately, I was scared. And I was scared of rejection because I'd experienced it many times already. I knew what would happen if I would go up. So there's a decent amount of people. I won't say a lot, but a decent amount of people there. It was a sunny/slightly windy day. And there were some people who had sat on the wooden picnic tables that were out on the field waiting for their lunch to be delivered. Others were sitting in the couch/bungalow area. Others were sitting on little picnic chairs, wooden picnic chairs that were facing the sea. And there wasn't too many choices, but I knew if I did nothing, then I would return to the same mediocrity that I was very much used to, which would be just, going back home, reading a book alone, going on the computer alone, and not really socializing or really progressing my social life in any way. So I was torn, and I think this is one of my key drivers. I think listeners, subscribers, they are curious, they wonder, they ask me, why are you doing all this? Like, what are you driven by? And I think one of my key drivers right now, and of course they all oftentimes change in time. I'm not saying that it'll always be like this, but one of my key drivers is moving away from mediocrity and towards life of my dreams. And as Will Smith says, dream building is an athletic event. So unfortunately, this was a time where I was stuck in that situation again. And the mantra, I guess you could say, for my entire Will's Personal Development Show brand, I would say, and this podcast would be to do everything you can with what you have right now in an honest, ethical way to build your dream life. And so there I was, kind of stuck in that crossroads, because I spotted 3 groups of attractive girls my age, which just doesn't happen. I know that's not a lot, but still it was something. it was better than nothing, like, because I just didn't have many options. And if you guys don't know, I work a 9-to-5 job full time. I do this podcast for fun on the side, and a job's a job. That's not really a place to meet people for dating. Plus, my job is small. I don't really talk to too many people. I stay in my little cubicle. So I just didn't have that many opportunities. And so here I am, just kind of nervous, standing there, nervous, awkward, a little bit anxious that I was looking weird, just standing alone, staring at people. So I kind of went up to this, I guess you can say, upper level where people ordered the food. It was really just a wooden staircase that led up to a upper level where the food stalls were. And I just stood there for a while and just kind of observed the view, appreciated it, and slightly scoped out the scene. And I was nervous because I knew what I wanted to do, what I had to do, which was approach these women, or at least one of these women. And I was scared because I didn't want to get rejected. I didn't want that face of disgust or annoyance that I would often see. And I'd done this before, pushing past that severe fear and being courageous, because courage isn't about not having any fear. It's about feeling that fear and doing it anyways. So I'd done this before, and the results weren't always great. It sometimes stung, It didn't make me feel good afterwards. It felt like, if I would go up and say, "Oh my goodness, excuse me, I just thought you looked so attractive," or "I liked your style, what's your name?" It just would not put the right vibe on things. They would get awkward. The other girls there would get awkward, and they would feel a little bit, taken aback. And if that one girl I complimented is not feeling it, then everyone there wants me to leave immediately. So there's this urgent undertone of annoyance. Maybe there's even disgust, or maybe a rude reaction like, "Ew, no thank you." And that was, that would have been crushing. So I had these negative feelings, and I was feeling really nervous. I was getting more and more nervous, and really just didn't feel good. So I just thought about it for a few minutes there, and I told myself, I am sick of this this whole idea of taking value from people. I just thought that this whole approach, this whole idea, this whole way of doing things was really very much about taking value from people. At least it felt that way. And all the successful people I study, it seems like it's more about giving value. And so I just didn't like that whole approach of approaching them in that way and like complimenting them, because it's a value taking type of dynamic, and people don't like value taken away from them. They want to enjoy themselves in the sun, and they don't want to be bothered, or at least they want to have fun. And so that was really the critical, amazing change that really flipped my mindset and resulted in something wonderful, something amazing, some amazing results. And so I just thought about that, and I said, you know what? Even if this is how some people will say is the best way to give dating advice, who knows if they're telling the truth? Like, they may just be like paying these girls that they approach on YouTube money on the side to act it out, or they're approaching, they're seeming really cool, but in reality they're getting the numbers, their phone numbers, and not even getting responses. Like, you don't know. So I said, you know what, I've tried this way enough times, and it's just not the best approach. I've done it, I've experienced it many times. I'm going to try something different. This was really the big switch I made, because I was stuck in that severe crossroad, this burning urge to do something. Otherwise I would have just gone back home to mediocrity, alone once again, something I've experienced hundreds of days, thousands of days, and I know what it's like. And I think that's one of the main drivers that you could potentially channel yourself. I think once you've experienced mediocrity for so many days or years in a row, you know what's to be expected. You know it's going to repeat after day, and I think that really pushes you to do and try anything you can to change your situation, to live a better life, a more interesting, fun-filled life. And for me, I went out my way to make sure that whatever I did it honestly, ethically, and with politeness. Because that way, no matter how they reacted to me, no matter how negative or bad the event turned, or if they were just like really rude to me or looked down at me in disgust, it doesn't matter. That was just a snapshot of how they felt, what they were feeling, and their judgment on me based on a small superficial slice of who I am, not who I really am. And as long as I'm honest, ethical, and not harming anyone, I can hold my head up high. So I incorporated all those values into my new approach, and I can't take full credit for this. A variation of this is what Tucker Max and his podcast, The Mating Grounds, he's been recommending for a while, and his whole idea was just have fun and meet new people. And I said, you know what, I'm going to meet some new people, and I'm going to find out something really interesting from them to make it interesting for myself, and perhaps deliver some value to them too. Maybe I'll share an interesting fact about myself. So that was the approach. Again, I kind of combined some of Tucker Max's advice. Another thing he said was that every person, no matter how boring, has at least one interesting fact about them. Your goal is to find that, and that was his goal to improve your conversation skills. So along with this, I had kind of built a core layer of confidence and just self-esteem in myself. We're just doing those love yourself exercises where I learned from the book Love Yourself as well as the Code of the Extraordinary Mind. So I had this confidence going into it, and I just walked up to them, and honestly, I was just proud of the approach in general, because I knew that the longer I waited from experience, your chances of not approaching or talking to a girl exponentially increase from my own personal experience. Not just because you chicken out more and you get more in your head, but because there's so many factors that can cause that girl to just disappear. Maybe she decides to go home, and that's the time to go home, and you're not looking, and she's gone. Or she has to go to the bathroom, and then she goes straight home. Or then she gets approached by other people, other guys, and then it's like, man, you're out of luck. So I went up to them. I went up to a group of 3, and they were beautiful girls that were my age, which is an anomaly. I don't live in a city where there's just an abundance of super hot girls all the time, so this was pretty awesome for me. And I went up to them, and I just kind of started by trying to set a tone of comfort. Women tend to be less muscular and athletic and be willing to defend themselves, and they don't know who you are when you're approaching. So you really have to set the tone of how you're going, what you're there for. Are you taking value or giving value? So I pretty much said, I'm not trying to be creepy, not trying to be disrespectful or polite or impolite. So I was trying to, show them that I wasn't trying to be rude or there to mess with them in an impolite way. And then I told them, I'm just here shortly. I will leave shortly if you don't want to talk to me, or some variation of that. I just said I just real quickly want to talk to you. That way, they don't get this negative reaction that I experienced, which is just oh God, how long is this guy gonna be here? Maybe he's gonna stick to us like mosquitoes for the next hour. We got to get out of here. And it just automatically they're in this negative tone. Now this is really the beauty of finding the truth and reality of life. You always want to test things out with real life. I mean, there's so much theory and dating advice out there. And so I tested it with real life and really figured out truly how girls respond based off my ethnicity, my approach, my demeanor, my personality. And sometimes what I found is that like what is good in theory is not good in practice. So anyhow, that's what I started with, and then I just said like I'm here to introduce myself, and my name is Will. I just wanted to meet you guys and find out one interesting fact about each of you. And then I just kind of ended with by saying that, hey, I'm here visiting. I don't really meet a lot of girls, so I'm just here to kind of talk to you. And I told myself I wanted to talk to at least one or two girls today. Otherwise, I don't really talk to any. I work in sort of like a cubicle setting. So that last part was really just to be genuine, honest, show that I'm not some type of player or someone who's just screwing around with them, and showing like a genuine, legitimate, honest reason why I'm there. So that's what I said, and they took it very well. So they were all very kind off the bat. They're like, oh yeah, that's awesome. My name is X, my name is Y, my name is Z. I shook all their hands, and then they went into an interesting fact about them. One was from New Zealand, and she did this and that. And then another was from, she didn't reveal where she was from. She talked about how she did this and that, and how she broke her leg running track once, and so on and so forth. And so I think one thing I've developed, it's more of a soft skill, but it's just taking practice repeatedly over years, is just an inner sense of self-esteem and faith in yourself, regardless of what others think. I've done things that I should be proud of, so that you don't have this low self-esteem. And so I came in with a smile and confidence, and then I did what I could to ease any tension or anxiety or seriousness there. Usually that's what humor is really good for. I'm not very much a funny guy, so I did the next best thing, which is kind of to just add a little bit of reduce the pressure there. So when the first person was trying to think of what to say, I was just like, I know that's a lot of pressure to think of your most interesting fact, so just pull a fact out of your head. I'm sure you have interesting stuff. And so that's what she did, and she did seem to be a little less tensed with that pressure. So they were very positive, and one girl specifically was really liking this. She was like very positive about this. So then she asked me, well, what's your interesting fact? And I had already had one in my head in mind, but then I had a couple others. So I told them, I'll give you two. The first one is that I used to play competitively on the state level for classical piano. And then I gave the second one, which was probably one of the quirkiest things about me, is that I listen to everything. I study successful people all the time, and I listen to everything that they have. Interviews, podcasts, biographies, books, everything. And at this point, I've probably already consumed 200 or 300 pieces of content on each of those. And to be honest, it's probably over 1,000, maybe 2,000, but maybe even 5,000 really, if you include all the podcasts and videos and articles. But I didn't want to be braggadocious or anything, so I just said 200. And then the same girl who was like kind of interested in this, she was like, oh, that's really cool. Like, does this include like audiobooks and podcasts as well? I'm like, yeah, it does. And so I saw this as a good sign. Like, they were actually like liking this and really into it. And then she asked, when she heard my second fact, her ears perked up and she got really interested. And this is always very fascinating to me, because when I mention that fact, I usually get two responses. The first response is just indifference. Like, they don't care. They're just like, oh, cool. And then, a small minority their ears will really perk up and they'll be like, really? Can you just like quickly summarize like what are your like the biggest patterns you found? So yeah, I kind of concluded by saying like, yeah, and it's easy for me to kind of identify and pick and correlate patterns from all this research I've done. So then she got really interested and she wanted to know some tips from what I learned. And I was like, okay, so you want like a top 10 tips? And she's like, yeah, something like that. There's something about like listicles that people really like, especially the number 10. It's not too much or not too little. So then, another girl got interested too, and I was like, okay, that's a bit of a broad question. I can help you more if you can give specific life goals that you're trying to achieve. Now, this is the part where I was a bit impressed by them. So all three immediately gave specific goals, problems that they were trying to solve. And that's a huge sign that they at least are on the right direction. They have a certain level of success mindset that they're going for. When you ask most people, like, what's your goal in life? What goals do you have? Usually they're taken aback and they don't know. There will be a long pause. Maybe it will take them 5 to 10 to 15 minutes to come up with like semi-solid goals. And even then, they're very broad and vague. And they usually conclude with, I'll have to think about it. I'll get back to you on that. And that's really a sign that they really aren't successful, or they won't be successful yet. Because if you don't know where you want to go, it doesn't matter where you're going, you're not going to end up anywhere because you don't have a focus and something to measure your progress by. If you have no goals whatsoever, there's not much you can do. But if your goal is like, I want to one day visit the Philippines, I don't care if I only stay for 1 day or 2 months, I want to visit the Philippines, preferably in the next year. That's a specific, measurable, time-bound goal that like you can work with, you can work towards. So they all responded almost not instantaneously all at once, but like one right after the others, which was fantastic. And I told them, now this is fun, I'm getting excited. So, I love helping people, I love delivering value, and I noticed that this was a point. Okay, I had them hooked a bit, but more importantly than that, I was delivering value to them. It wasn't about me annoying them or telling them how pretty they are and how I want to get their number. They were interested. So the first one said that she was she was studying medicine, and then the second one said she wanted to make a lot of money so she could travel, which I actually love because it's a common question. I know how to answer, and she's honest. There's a stigma behind money and how it's shameful. Some people think it's shameful to make a lot of money or selfish or something, but she was honest about that, which I liked. And then the third woman, she said, these were all young millennial women. The third woman said, work-life balance. So they all had like specific things they wanted to work on, which was fantastic. And I was like, this is fun. Let's get to it. So I was like, first I'll start with the travel one, because I think some of what I can teach has universal aspects that apply to all of your questions. So with travel, or anything really you want to accomplish in life, you want to keep asking why. So let's say you want to make a lot of money. Well, why? Because you want to travel. Well, why do you want to travel? Because it makes you happier. And so once you get to that final core desire or close to it, you can find shortcuts or ways of getting there faster that doesn't require all these convoluted steps in between. Now, obviously, I'm more composed while doing this podcast episode. So my goal is not to just recap the story, but to dive deeper into these different areas, because I think there's so common. There's such common issues that millennials or just people in general face. So I'll give much more detail than I explained while talking to these girls. But in terms of that, find your final desires and really figure out how you can get there, and really ask if you really need all those steps in between to do so. When it comes to travel, Tim Ferriss, a very successful investor, angel investor, a podcaster. He has 200 million downloads almost on his podcast, The Tim Ferriss Show. Best-selling author, all sorts of other stuff. He has a great approach to this. So some people phoned in questions about travel, and they like many people were under the impression that you had to save up and wait until you're 60 years of age before you can travel and live life and have fun. And he says, like, most people assume travel is expensive, but work out the math and you can usually shortcut the process because it's usually a lot cheaper than you think. And when you leverage the difference in cost of living and standard of living in certain countries, you can live like a king or queen at a fraction of the cost you do here in America. So I definitely said it a lot more eloquently now as I'm recording this podcast than I said it there. So hopefully they understood. But I gave the example of how I have a plan to visit the Philippines next year, and how because the standard of living and cost is so great, I can live really well on the beaches there because I really love beaches, and it's not going to cost me that much. It'll probably cost me less than here. Probably the flight is probably the most expensive thing because of just the sheer standard of living there. You can get a full course meal with like all sorts of food in those Southeast Asian countries. In Thailand, for example, you can get pad thai and noodles and all sorts of really good meat that'll fill you up for the entire day for like $3 or $2 sometimes. And like a straight up, mansion style resort is like only like $25 to $50 a night. And you can like literally the standard of living difference is ridiculous there. I've seen vlogs and videos and Instagram videos of like people living literally like emperors there while spending less than they would in America. It's just a bit strange, but just the differentials in different countries. And that's really one of the reasons I've been hooked with the travel hacking community for a few years now. There's more information on that if you're interested by going to my ultimate travel hacking article. It's at willyoulaugh.com/travel. A simple URL you can go to. But that's what I kind of told her. And you really gotta work out the math. Even let's say you want to visit. Okay, you like screw the standard of living stuff. I don't want to live in a mansion in Thailand. I want to go to the most famous, expensive cities in the world: Paris, England, Los Angeles, New York. Now that's a really tough debacle, but even something like this, you can use the same principle of working out the math to get it done. Because people don't have a number, they're just like, they just assume it's some monstrous price. They don't go. They just think it's just out of my budget. I don't know how much it is, but I know it's really expensive. But you work it out. You do the math. You figure out the cost of a flight there. Maybe it's $1,000 a person. Then you work out the math for an Airbnb, which is slightly less cozy as a hotel, but maybe sometimes more cozy and cheaper. And maybe that's $60 or $100 a night. And let's say you want to explore the scene there, Eiffel Tower, and you have to pay for a taxi. Maybe that's $30 a night. So all in all, plus food. Let's say food costs $50. You can stay there for a good few days, maybe 3 or 4 days, for under $2,000. That's something that's attainable, that's reachable. $2,000 is not some monstrous goal like, I need $1 million to go to Paris, or live a life where I travel the world. So I think that's the first principle that you have to understand with travel hacking. I think it's well known in the travel hacking community, which is huge, but I'm still surprised how the general public isn't aware of it yet. So that's the first thing. And I think ultimately, some people will say, like, let's take the book, The Stress-Free Art of Tidying Up. It's a 6 million copy bestseller. She asserts in the book that everyone's main goal in life is to be happy, because if you ask that why question enough, everyone ultimately comes back to happiness. Why do you want to travel? Oh, to be happier. I mean, I'm just going to go with her concept for the sake of this podcast, but I can't entirely agree. I think people do things for other reasons, not just happiness. They do it for pleasure, survival, and reproduction of themselves or their children or their children's children. They do it for ego. They do it for status elevation. They do it for revenge. There's a lot of reasons, but I mean, generally speaking, okay, I generally agree. Most people do ultimately do what they do for happiness. If you want to go that deep into it, and that's what your true goal is, which I think it truly is for a lot of people. Like for me, at the end of the day, ultimately, like a good portion, not all of what I do, is ultimately to be a happy person. Now, if that's the case, then you have to work on that. You know, a lot of people get caught in the mid-ground. They try and become rich or famous or successful or well-known or high status or get the perfect bodies because they think that will bring them happiness. However, there's so many stories of successful rich people who have killed themselves because they're still depressed, or they're drug addicts, or they have a lot of issues. And I mean, I wrote a whole article about it, pointing to all these interviews and videos and stories of people like that. And new people come around every year, it seems. New celebrities who kind of reveal this and how they learned the hard way, how they got all rich and successful and they're still unhappy. There's Cara Delevingne, J. Cole, there's Lady Gaga, there's Anthony Bourdain, there's that guy, that comedian who played the genie in Aladdin. You get the idea. My point is that, you know, those superficial things, maybe they're not truly what you should be looking for. So I wrote a whole article on this too. If you just search on Google, I'm rich but unhappy, I'm the first or second result on Google for that, which is pretty cool. It's pretty in-depth of an article too, if you want to explore that topic deeper. So what I suggest doing, what I've done, is studied the science of happiness. This is something I spent a long time studying because I was really depressed at one point in my life. Nothing really was going well. I was lost, or I thought I was lost. I thought I had no success with women, no friends, and all this stuff. And everyone had opinions on what made them happier. And so one of the things that made the biggest impact for me, there's a few, but one of them was looking at the research in the positive psychology field. It turns out there's been a couple decades worth of scientific research that's been international. It's been done across multiple countries and cultures and ethnicities on happiness and well-being and what really brings happiness and what doesn't. And I've done a lot of in-depth podcast episodes breaking that down. But the point in a nutshell is that, you know, up to a certain level, like a mid-class first world income, the correlation between wealth and happiness drops rapidly, and you get much less bang for your buck, which is incredible. Like, we're not talking millions of dollars here. Like, you don't have to get even close to that, or even, you know, six figures really to really hit that inflection point where you can be as happy as possible. So I found that incredibly interesting, and I suggest you know, either checking out my happiness podcast episodes or my article, which you can find at willyoulaugh.com/happy, on any actionable science-backed practices you can do to increase your happiness now. I truly believe that anyone, no matter their situation, can become resiliently and sustainably happier for the long term right now by implementing some of these principles, because many don't cost money. to do. You can do them for free right now. Some of them, to give you an example, are helping other people, volunteering, improving the lives of other people. Another would be, forming strong social relationships with people. These could be friends, family. The strength and number of those relationships will really help with your happiness. And then there's sociability. There's a number of other things. Just donating $5. It's not about the amount you donate, but the thought of helping someone else with a small monetary or time or resource investment can also be huge. And there's other things that can bring you happiness right now. Gratitude exercises. So check that out for more, but I've already kind of listed some great ones. So that's it in a nutshell in terms of travel and happiness. That said, I think there's making money in and of itself. This is a tougher and more broad concept. How to make money, how to get yourself started with a side hustle. How do you turn $100 into $1,000 to $100,000 to $1 million and get rich? It's not easy, and it requires doing what unsuccessful people are unwilling to do because they're too lazy or it doesn't feel good or whatever. And that's really the core start of it. So, that's a topic for a whole nother podcast. I've already done a few podcasts on this, and I've done some interviews and will be doing some more interviews with successful people where they will teach you and give you tips on how you can make a lot of money doing what you love for a living and how to start up and get started with that. And I also ask a lot of questions around limiting beliefs like, I need money to make money, to kind of break the excuses that I hear quite often. So that's a topic for another video, so I'll leave it there. Now the next topic, I think another universal topic that we all need help with, is school, academics, and career. So this directs to the other girl who asked me, I'm studying medicine, I want to be a doctor. Do you have any tips for that? So the first thing I told her was that most successful people, if not all, are very much genuinely passionate about what they do. They really, really enjoy it. They're not faking it. And unfortunately, I know a lot of Asian American peers and friends who are in med school right now, and they say they enjoy it, but I can't say I buy it. I don't really think they do. I think some of them, if not many, have convinced themselves, thanks to their parents' pressure, that this is what they're passionate about. So much so that they've truly convinced themselves they believe it comes from their own decision. But I mean, there's just so many things being in this culture that just makes me skeptical of that whole idea. Like the sheer percentage of Asian American millennials I know who are trying to get into or are in law school or med school, it's just too high. It's abnormally high. And just the way that they say that they're passionate about it, they have sometimes like a blank, energy depleted look on their face when they say it, like, I'm passionate about this. And when you're passionate about something, you're emotionally and your body language, you show it with your emotions and body language. It's not like you don't have this look of pain or like boredom on your face. So I mean, there's other signs as well, and I'm not saying they all have tricked themselves. I'm sure there's some that truly are passionate and love being doctors, but I think it's important. Like you have to be truly honest with yourself, because your heart knows deep down, and that's really where you can really find that zone of genius where everything just explodes. You love it so much that you practice more, and you succeed because you're practicing even more, and it's just this endless flywheel of like passion leads to more practice, which leads to more success, which leads to more practice and passion. It's a lovely cycle. However, that being said, I recently read the book Peak by Anders Ericsson and Robert Poole. And Anders is a researcher who has consulted and studied some of the world's top performers, everything from chess to world-class memorizers to track and field to high jump to basketball to spelling bees to violinists to pianists. He has worked with, talked to, coached, consulted, and done, longitudinal studies on hundreds and thousands of these top performers for decades now, and he's finally come out and written this new book to kind of distill all his discoveries and address a lot of the myths and misconceptions that have come out based off his research, such as his study with the violinists that was cited in Malcolm Gladwell's book Outliers, which populated the 10,000 hours rule belief, something that everyone from Will Smith to Ed Sheeran and to Macklemore has talked about now. He's debunked a lot of myths in this book, and the book really addresses this idea, this myth of passion and talent. And he poses a controversial but fresh perspective that talent and passion are close to unuseful. Like, they don't contribute as much to becoming world class as deliberate, consistent practice over decades. And so he kind of asserts that with almost any skill, if you use a specific formula of deliberate practice he outlines in the book for many, many years, you have a high chance of becoming really good at something, even if you have very little skill at this or talent. And as far as passion goes, and you don't need it, or he thinks it's not as important as people think it is. And he points to mainly 2 studies to kind of prove this, and I say that in quotes because this is one thing I'm a bit skeptical of, but I value him as an authority and credibility. So I want to pose his advice, which is that he points to 2 different studies. One was this survey of national spelling bee winners and competitors, as well as another study of world-class pianists. That's people who play the piano competitively on the national or international level. And with both of these groups, he found that they both sometimes really hated studying, like almost all of them, especially the spelling bee group. Pretty much all of them disliked practicing, but they did what they had to because they wanted to win the championship. So it was an interesting, counter argument to this whole passion belief. I don't necessarily agree with it. I think that his point should be that, and this may be his true point, the point should be that you can still achieve a world-class level or close to it if you're not passionate about something. So if you want to go that doctor route and you are willing to slug through that pain of hating this, but still deliberately practicing and iterating off of it, and I explain what deliberate practice is briefly to that girl. There's more variables in the book, but I did a whole podcast breaking down all the steps of deliberate practice, but there's a number of different parts to it. The main part is deliberately assessing and analyzing what you did wrong and iterating to improve upon that by building stronger and more accurate mental models of the world, rather than just regular practice, which is just mindlessly repeating something over and over again, which doesn't lead to rapid and sustainable growth. But his whole, so potentially, if you want to be a doctor or whatever you want to be and you're not passionate about it, but you think that this is the key to wealth or happiness, or that's just your goal in life because you want to please your parents, I think it's a bad approach. But Anders is saying if you want to take it, there's still a good chance that you can do really well even if you're not passionate about it. That being said, from experience myself, from going far down the medical route, to even taking the MCAT to apply to med school, I know from personal experience that it's just so much. It's like magnitudes easier if you enjoy a topic versus if you don't like it. One's like, running uphill, another's like running downhill. You're just going to do so much better. It's not going to feel like work. You're going to work harder. You're going to work longer. You're going to progress faster because every day it lights you up about it. And so therefore, I think, I really, really would recommend you follow the passion approach that Warren Buffett is a huge proponent of. He says, like, his main advice to anyone is to follow your passion. So, think about it. You guys might not be going to med school or anything, but I think there are plenty of international listeners to this. I know there's people from India and Africa who read my blog and listen in, and many of those countries, I've been told that the norm is not passion. That's a weird, risky thing. Their parents, their whole culture is telling them, you suck it up. You find a job that pays the bills, that puts food on the table, whether or not you like it or not. But this is a new era where, with technology, the internet, artificial intelligence, and social media, I believe there's so many more opportunities now that people can turn what they love into a legitimate, career that does, pays them really well. So just think about it. I think in the long run, it'll make you a much happier person on average than just like suffering until the end and then, sucking it up and then just taking the time you don't have working to spend that money. Like, is that, because you're going to be spending most of your life working, like, is that worth hating what you do? At the least, find something you can tolerate or do okay at, and just keep searching, keep iterating on your job to find ways of making it more fun. So again, another huge topic that I think is really worth covering because of all the people I know in med school, that whole dilemma of passion and the just absurdity of it, given my Asian American community and awareness of it. And again, none of these girls were Asian, so it's definitely something that's cross-cultural. I've spoken to black, white, Hispanic people, and although it's most predominant with Asians, I've met people of almost every ethnicity who've had similar parental pressure and drive to want to become doctors themselves for similar reasons. So the third and final girl, her question was work-life balance. Now, first I want to talk about extremes. So with any of the questions, the problems, the goals we've mentioned, extremes of any situation have different, metrics and requirements behind them. For example, an extreme would be, I want to become the number one best marathon runner for the 5K in the world. There's only one title for that, one gold medal for that, and that's extreme. You have to be the best out of all the billions of people in this world. So when you have such an extreme like that, it requires much more sacrifice and much different requirements. And so same thing with like being successful and making tons of money. Like, depending on your goal, it may require a lot more sacrifice and a lot more things to align perfectly. So anything that's ridiculously, absurdly incredible in that sense, like becoming a billionaire or becoming the richest person in the world, that's one of the things that I think Anders Ericsson does a decent job of debunking, which is this whole idea that, like, how Malcolm Gladwell points out that, if you look at Bill Gates or Steve Jobs or, Olympic gymnasts, they have absolutely perfect aligned childhoods. They were born in the right place at the right time, and all things worked out tremendously. For example, he points to, world-class hockey players and gymnasts who, from a very early age, were born at that, like, perfect month, and then for them to, like, develop and, like, get bigger than their competitors while staying in the same age group. And then the gymnasts, the best ones all just so happen to be born right next to, a facility where they would train, where the world's top trainers for that sport lived and coached, and they all started at an early age of like 3 or 4. So everything was like aligned in that way. Well, of course, for such an extreme result, so many things have to align well. But I would say most people listening to this, myself included, at the current moment, our dream lives don't require such extremes, and therefore not so many sacrifices. I've listened and watched to a lot of interviews by Elon Musk, and this guy clearly sacrifices a ton of family time, almost all of it, and social life, all to run 2 companies at once. He works over 40 hours at one company per week and then spends the rest of his time at another company. And to have such a multi-billion dollar success at such a high level requires tremendous sacrifice. That said, for someone like you or me, we probably don't need that. We're probably just looking for something normal or, moderately above average. And therefore, it's easily doable, or at least moderately doable, if you have the right strategy and plan in mind to have a good work-life balance. Of course, the farther up you want to go, the more loftier your goals are, the more sacrifices. If you want to become the CEO of a company, you have to make sacrifices. That may require taking time off from family, weekends, whatever. For me, I wouldn't mind just making like multiple 6 figures on the lower end. I don't need to make millions of dollars a year. I don't need to become world famous. And so that's a decent goal. It's not anything crazy, and therefore it's doable. Plus, I'm single and I don't have much else to do outside of work, so I have that free time to spend on this right now. So it's doable. So my advice I gave to this girl, the first thing I said was like, figure out what's important to you. When people say work-life balance, it breaks down into essentially a few categories. It's work. This could be your career or running a business. And then the second would be your social life. This would be hanging out with friends, and then, partying or sailing or traveling, whatever you like doing. And then maybe a third one would be family time, whether spending it with your children or your spouse or your parents. So those are like the 3 main categories, and I think everything else kind of fits into a sub category of those 3 categories. I mean, I guess you could say fitness is another one, like spending time to eat well and exercising. But those are really like the only categories. And you can argue, fitness/health is a subcategory of your personal/social life. So, really decide what's most important to you, what is important to you, and what's not important to you. Just because everyone says that family time is most important, and that the top 5 regrets of the dying book says that, spending time with family might be one of the things that is valuable, doesn't mean that you have to make that one of your priorities, because maybe you have a screwed up dysfunctional family that you don't want to spend any time with because they've done nothing but screw your life over, and that's a real thing for some people out there. So don't get in your head. Stop getting in your head about what others think and what others value. Don't put put your priorities and make your own decisions, and find out what's logically right for you. And that's a little bit of the case with me with family. I mean, I'm not saying I have a ridiculously screwed up family, but I think I've spent plenty of family time with them, and oftentimes they don't have success mindsets in place, so sometimes they drag me down more than help improve me. And almost all of them are currently in a state where they're like, you spend way too much time with me, or I got my own stuff to do with. I'm not asking you to spend time with me. I'm good. Like, we've spent enough time together. So, that's why I've personally deprioritized family time, because they're sated, they're satisfied with it. And I could go like half a year, maybe even 2 years, without seeing them at all. Maybe that's a bit much, like once a year without seeing them for a day or more, and they'd be completely fine. Plus, it helped my mental health and success. So, figure out what's important for you. Maybe it's the opposite. Family time really matters, and it's health and fitness really matters too. But also, maybe it's a subcategory that matters more than most people would. Maybe it's none of this, but recreation time or alone time, where you just get to relax and sit by the beach or hike. Maybe that's something that you really care about. Or cooking time, or something where you just get to de-stress. Figure out what really matters to you, outline it, and it doesn't have to be complicated. In fact, I recommend keeping it simple. Writing out those top 5 or top 3 or 4 priorities. For me, it's down to career, then it's personal social time to make friends and make strong friendships and improve my dating life, for my happiness and future. And then family time is way down the list, almost like not really. It's there, it's still on the list, but at the bottom right now, based off like how well I'm doing on each of these. So you rate yourself on how you're doing with each of these, and then you work to improve these. Always start with the one that you have the lowest score on, because that's where you see the biggest impact. So again, you guys listening to this podcast have gotten a much more expansive, detailed bit of advice than I gave these 3 girls. I just told that one girl to kind of break it down into quadrants, figure out what matters most to you, and then make the time to do this, but also realize you don't have to be perfect. So I told her that Sarah Blakely is a female billionaire, and her Insta stories on Instagram are fire. I share them all the time with people because it just is a awesome demonstration that you truly do not have to be perfect. So many mothers think they have to be super moms. They have to work super hard and then take care of their kids and take them to soccer. And Sarah, as this female billionaire who has seemingly accomplished so much, is just so real with it. She's genuine. She'll be on her Insta story and she'll be like, man, it's only 8 a.m. and I'm dying here. I have 4 children, and I've had to put 2 of them in timeout 2 times, and I have to lecture this one, and I've cooked them dinner, and it's a mess here. My hair's all over the place, and she's running this multi-billion-dollar empire, Spanx. So it is incredible. I wish I had mentioned Spanx to them, because all girls recognize that company, but they were like, what was her name again? So I don't think they recognized who she was, but the fact that they asked means that they may actually look her up on Instagram and follow her, which I think will provide tremendous value for these girls. So they really connected with that last point. Like 2 of them commented like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, you don't have to be perfect. It's not about being perfect and making seeming like you have every one of these areas down pat. So I think last bit of advice just goes back to all the time management principles that I have in mind. Like these are things that are very well known if you study any productivity books or advice, so I won't stress them here. I've done articles on them, plenty of articles. If you search time management on my site or productivity, you'll find them. But the basic idea is as it seems, like you want to do the biggest priorities first. You want to block it off in your calendar. You want to avoid distractions or task switching. You want to do the most important things in a distraction-free environment. Turn off email, Slack, text messages. Your phone is your biggest distraction. Simple, basic, fundamental time management principles like that will really help you, like, increase your time tremendously. And most people have a lot more time than they think. If you track your time, like I took out a note paper and I just tracked every few minutes, like how I spent my time each time I switched tasks, and the results were stunning. Like, I thought I was productive. I was this kid who was getting near straight A's on all these advanced courses. I was still spending like 3 hours plus just on social media and like wasting time. Like that, those small breaks, if you let them, really add up over time. So my whole point is that, like, you have a lot more time than you think. Like, you work 9 to 5 maybe, but like, what are you doing from 5 to 11 p.m.? That's still another good 6 hours every day on a work day that you could be using effectively. And I think the successful people you see, Gary Vaynerchuk, they truly live 2 times or 3 times the life that you do, simply because when they're there, they are present, they are maximizing and squeezing the juice out of their time and using the most that they can out of it. Whereas, the average person is just unaware and they let their time just slip by and get distracted and get off track, and the small talk and this and that just really sucks out their time. So that's something I wish I told them. Didn't think of it when I was talking to them. So there's work-life balance for you. For me personally, work is work. You have that 9 to 5 schedule, but you can do what you can to maximize that time with those time management principles. And when you do so, you can truly get more work done in a day than others get done in 2 days by, doing that stuff effectively. And when you do so, you've just made back half your work week every week, and you have more time during work to relax, to be less stressed because you've gotten so much done. I've had that feeling myself, and it feels fantastic. So that's a great way of just turning the ball in your favor when you already have this allotted time when you are working. Distractions are like a killer. Each time you're distracted, it takes like 20% of your time to readjust to what you were doing before the distraction came along. So that's something that's huge. That's something that Todd Herman taught me from his research. So incredibly useful tips. Now, when you're outside of work, you budget that time. You have to be conscious and aware of it. Like, schedule it in, plan it. Otherwise, you're going to forget. Like, if you just think, oh, shoot, I should care about my personal and social life, but you don't actually plan it out to some extent or take any action to improve your social life, you're not going to do it. Like, just today, I went on a date, and I don't go on many dates, and I wouldn't have if I didn't block in conscious time where it was important for me to go out and find those dates through dating apps or online dating services. So if you don't have that planned out, or at the very least you're not taking action to invest into a specific area, whether it's your social life or dating life, then how is it going to happen? It's not. You're just going to sit there and you're going to be like, man, I really don't have a social or dating life. So the responsibility falls on you. You have full control of your life. And yes, we do have chores. Yes, we do have other responsibilities. Maybe it's taxes, it's tax season. Maybe it's cooking. You have to cook your meals and meal prep. But even then, you still have, okay, that may have used up 3 out of the 6 hours of free time you have once you get off work. What are you doing with the other 3? Maybe you sleep a little bit later at midnight rather than 11. So, it doesn't. I truly believe that most people, because they're not going for some ridiculous extreme goal, they can have a really good work-life balance and get all they need done. They have the time, they're just not using it effectively, and they're not being present, and they're not organizing it and using fundamental productivity principles to squeeze the juice out of the time they have. And especially if you're just looking for a moderately above average lifestyle with moderately above average goals, you don't have to go through, the 12 labors of Hercules and sacrifice everything to get there. It's doable. It's possible. You likely have the time. You just have to make it work. Now, that kind of ends my advice for the most part. Jack Welch, of course, he says that the higher up you want to go, the more successful you want to be in the corporate ladder. At some point, you will have to sacrifice, and it's going to cut into your personal or social or family life. That's just the truth of it. So I'll end with that. I want to conclude by finishing up my story. So I told them all this, but in a briefer form, and they were into it. They were kind of repeating what I said and nodding their heads. And I concluded, and I said, thanks so much, ladies. I didn't want to bother them and be a nuisance or a mosquito or fly, just kind of standing there and hovering there for too long. So I was like, thank you guys. I'll see you later. I think they asked me a couple other questions, where I was from, but nothing too long. And I just wanted to follow true to what I claimed. I wasn't there to take value from them or stay too long, and I didn't want them to get weirded out, wondering when I would leave. So I just said my goodbyes. And one of them, while I was walking away, she was like, thank you for coming up to us. You're very nice guy, and you were very brave and courageous to do that. That's really tough to do. It's probably even tougher to do when you're approaching other guys. So, I thought it went really well overall. In terms of physical attraction, I don't know if there really was any chance there. I think with girls, they need more time to get to know you. So I mean, looking back, maybe I should have stayed a little bit longer, especially when they were a bit more into it. I do remember during part of it, one of the girls started kind of looking away and getting bored when I was giving advice to another girl. So then I tried to reel it back in and kind of talk to all of them again, and switch to another girl's advice to kind of keep their attention. But other than that, they seem to be really into it. Of course, they called me a nice guy. One of them called me a nice guy, which, although it seems bad, you're like, oh, that's not a good sign. They're not into you. The way she said it was you're a nice person. It wasn't a derogatory, I'm going to friend zone you thing. She's genuinely you're actually a nice person. And so I don't think, being nice is bad, or getting a compliment that you're nice is always bad. There's that stigma that it is nowadays because of the negative stigma of the nice guy being friend zoned, but that wasn't really the case in this one. Overall, I thought it was fantastic. It just speaks to my whole nibble method technique that I've talked about how if you can gradually work towards a goal, that's even for the better. So I went out of that interaction feeling fantastic, just great. I provided value. They enjoyed the whole thing. there wasn't some weird pressure or awkwardness or annoyance or disgust from these girls, because I was there to have fun, meet them, and provide some value. And that's what I did, and I came out of it better off, realizing that I had improved their lives with some advice, and they got some advice from it. So I just wanted to share that story to give you the advice I shared, but also to kind of give you some social/life advice in a real world example. I thought that whole interaction was quite incredible, and I'm sure there will be haters who might be like, oh well, you didn't get their numbers or this or that. But at the end of the day, girls are always on guard, and that's that approach just rarely works. You have to be so aggressive, and it's such a numbers game with it. I just thought that this one works a lot better. Tucker Max says that he got much more successful with women when he was having fun and meeting them, whereas when he was trying to get some objective, whether it was a date or sleep with that woman, and it was because the whole energy and way he conveyed himself was different. Girls want to have fun, and when they see you're having fun, their guard lowers. They don't see you trying to get some objective. Now, I'll probably never meet these girls again, unfortunately, but maybe I will. It's a small world, and I didn't get their contact information or anything. I didn't want to be too crazy, but it was a good test. And from there, I can kind of make tweaks and iterate and improve from there. Maybe next time, I will have stayed a little bit longer when I sensed that they were into me, or at least positive about the interaction. Maybe the next time, I would have, at the very least, took a picture together with them and tagged them on Instagram. And that way I would have had some level of contact with them at the least. I didn't do this because I thought that was still too value-taking. It was in my mind, but I was like, that's too much. It's kind of creepy. Why are you taking a photo of us? Was this your whole intention anyways, to kind of take photos with these strangers and post it on your Instagram and show off, when in reality you barely know us? But maybe I'm overthinking it. Nonetheless, I think it was a fantastic interaction. I think it's a great demonstration of how a normal average guy with a lot of obstacles in front of him, and not any real innate talent, can work through a lot of issues that we all kind of face. Approach anxiety, fear of rejection, self-esteem, struggles with where they're living, with the demographics and so forth, and courage, having the courage to get past that fear, ultimately to come up with a new innovative solution that delivers more value and improves others' lives, rather than just getting hung up on some small-minded thing like, oh my goodness, I harassed X girls these days and none of them gave me their number, and even if when they did, they didn't text back because they just gave me their number to get me out of there because I was annoying them. I don't know. I think this whole idea of delivering value is immensely important versus taking value. So that kind of wraps it up, and I think I want to leave this podcast with what I'm going to coin the thought of the day. I think I'm going to experiment with ending every podcast with something that really makes you think about how you approach the world, and so that you can really start seeking the truth about reality more, rather than just live with false assumptions and limiting beliefs that are preventing you from achieving the success and life that you want. So my thought of the day is related to what I've covered so far, which is that when it comes down to it, I've had for many years tons of limiting beliefs and frustration when it comes to women. And I told myself this lie that, oh, it's racism. No woman as an American likes me because I'm Asian, and white women and so forth, they don't like me because they're racist, and they don't like Asians, and they don't like dating Asians because that's just their preference. And it's so hard for me to get a girl, and that's why I can't get a single girl. That was a lie that I had told myself for years and years, and I'm still trying to get rid of. But the truth is, when I was brutally honest with myself, when I look back at my history, interactions with women, the truth was, there was women who liked me that were white, but they were overweight or they weren't that attractive, and I wasn't into it, and I forgot about them. I ignored them. And so I told myself this false story that, it's just racism. When in reality, I had forgotten that, no, there were ones that liked me, but it was my own kind of bias to kind of forget about them, the unattractive ones, and just focus on the attractive ones, that I painted this false story. I think we all do this to a certain extent, and I think it's so important for us to really figure out the truth to the matter. And so, there's been a good amount of women who were white, who were black, even Asian, that were into me. But, physically speaking, I just wasn't attracted to them. And they didn't even come up on my radar. I just kind of rejected them or didn't really feel it and forgot about them, and told myself the story that all women didn't like me because of racism. So think about that. Like, how are you doing similar stuff to you? Maybe it's not around dating. Maybe it is or isn't around racism, but maybe there's a story you're telling yourself that isn't true or is only partially true, that is really affecting your success. Obviously, my story, how did my false story affect my success? Well, it made me more discouraged. It made me more bitter, resentful. It made me want to give up sooner. And that's not helpful. So think about this. Maybe it's, for you, it could be something completely different, but around the same principles. Around, finding out the truth with reality. So let's say you don't have any racism issues because you just don't, and you have no dating issues, but you do tell yourself the story that you can't get muscular because it's just in your genetics. And even no matter how hard you work, you don't see muscular gain. But in reality, there's a few months when you did, but then you got back into cheat meals and you forgot about it, and you gained your weight, and you got tired of exercising and working out, so you lost those gains. Or maybe you told yourself, this was something one of my friends told me many times. He says, working out for me doesn't help. I went to the gym every day for a solid 6 months, and I didn't see any gains, and I'm still skinny. And therefore, I believe that working out will do nothing to my body, and I'll stay skinny forever no matter what happens. This was a near full-grown adult in college who told me this repeatedly. So there's like legitimate, clearly false lies that people have convinced themselves are true. And he was a pretty smart guy too, but that's what he believed. In reality, he probably only worked out for 3 months, on and off. He didn't get enough protein in his body to really maximize the gains he saw, and maybe he didn't do the lifts, the types of lifts, like compound lifts, like shoulder press or bench press or deadlifts, that really increase and execute and stimulate the muscles enough to really see noticeable gains quickly. And he wasn't patient enough. Sometimes it takes years to really see that progress. Unfortunately, in that short period of time, because people want to see results quickly, he gave up, and he had that false story he told himself that no matter what, he would remain skinny for the rest of his life. Unfortunately for fortunately for me, I was very lucky to not believe those things. I always had hope. And if you've been following my Instagram, #WillYouLaugh_, and you've been seeing the photos, I'm finally starting to see gains. It took me a long time, many years, and testing and trying out different habit approaches. But people are coming up to me and they're telling me that they're seeing the gains on me. They're seeing the muscles pop up throughout my body, and it's finally happening. It didn't happen in high school, and I thought it was over because people were already muscular by then. And it didn't happen in college, but it's finally happening. So thanks for listening. Hopefully this podcast helped. Please hit that subscribe button. If you're a helpful person and you really found this valuable, please leave a rating on Apple Podcasts for my podcast. That will help me rank higher on the charts there, and reach more people. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you later.
Thank you for listening to Will's Personal Development Podcast. You can find more at willyoulaugh.com.